So it's interesting. So we have these two monotheistic rival religions, Christianity and Islam. But then, as we said earlier, we have all this classical antiquity, all these Greek and Roman gods that populate this epic.
And how do you understand this? Because there's so much emphasis. I've seen this is real, this is not fantasy. And suddenly you have Bacchus as the enemy, and you have this bizarre Titan Adamastor down in Africa serving the role of Polyphemus.
Right. It's not that anyone does actually believe in these Greek or Greek-like gods. They are there clearly for that literary genealogy that he's trying to draw, connecting himself to Homer and Virgil, and therefore shoring up his literary credentials.
I think it's partly that, absolutely. I think also you're seeing the first stirrings of a long-standing tradition that will go on for centuries after that, whereby the Europeans understand, all right, pagans, these like India, people, these polytheists in India, and that we see these animists and polytheists in Africa, they're like classical pagans. We can understand them like that. So that Bacchus becomes this god of India. And they weren't crazy. This leads to the actual discovery of the Indo-European commonality of Sanskrit and a bunch of the European languages. And indeed the pantheons, the Greek gods and goddesses have kissing cousins over in India and in points in between. So he's actually intuiting something that's not altogether mistaken. And again, I think it's Kamlash's decades in China and India. He actually thinks, oh, I can relate this to my classical training.
Yeah, it's true. I mean, Bacchus, the Greek god Dionysus, is in Euripides the Bacchae seen as an Eastern god. An Asian god. He comes to Greece, is rejected at first. There's a big struggle about whether this foreign Eastern Asian god will be accepted. Finally is. So this is sort of the flip side of that.
And I think also for Kamlaj that the classical reference gives him a chance to strut his stuff vis-a-vis Homer in a different way. So if you're looking at either Bacchus and the scenes among the gods and goddesses or at Adamastor, what strikes you, having come from Homer in the classical tradition, what's the value added? What new stuff can he do as a kind of realist with this fantasy world?
I think my first observation about it is that it just seems somewhat artificial. It doesn't seem to come naturally out of that world. It does feel like literary embellishments. But you seem to think that it's more than that.
Yes, I really am quite struck by the sly ways he introduces realism into fantasy, because of course that, as you were saying, is his real critique against Homer. Great poet, but he didn't know what he was talking about. And what he doesn't know about is reality. So you get the kind of modern pressing back against the fantasy. The wonderful moment, there's this giant Titan Adamastor who wants to carry off and rape this nymph, and the nymph's mom says, you really got to watch out for this guy. And she says, I'm not worried, he's so large, he can't possibly rape me. And these are issues of scale, size matters now in the modern world. That wouldn't have appeared in all these old fantasies of what's possible, what's not possible. So on the one hand, it's comic. But then at the same time, within a couple of stanzas after that, he's going to the real-life consequences of this. So you have the curse of Adamastor against these impious adventurers, much like Polyphemus curses Odysseus. But with what differences of the curse? With Polyphemus, the curse is you're going to take you forever, and a lot of your shipmates are going to die, right? Your ships won't make it back.
You'll arrive alone. I think part of the curse is that he will be unrecognized in his homeland. His travails won't be over even when he gets to Ithaca.
Now, it's quite different than with Adamastor's curse, because it's not so much Vasco da Gama will have any problems. He'll get back. He'll be famous. 2 of his 4 ships make it back. But that his successors will have a series of curses against them, one after another. And stark stanzas about this poor adventurer who, with his wife and 2 small children, are shipwrecked and then starved to death and are pillaged by natives. Very grim, kind of, and very, very real. And this is Adamastor saying this. With Kamlaj, I was thinking, looking at it this time, he says at one point that fortune is going to come against you because fortune is fickle, always do this. But actually in the Portuguese it says Romusia, which is a Greek name for Nemesis, the goddess who punishes pride, hubris. And I think there's a deep way in which Kamlaj remains very, very loyal to this classical tradition, a kind of classical ethics that still works now in a Christian world for him.
though Adamastor himself is kind of modeled on Polyphemus, the Cyclops, perhaps, to some extent.
There's a direct reference to Polyphemus a couple of pages before,
exactly.
leading up. So then it's interesting why he invents
but he kind of makes this up, this figure.
Yes.
Yeah.
Very interesting. Now this to me is one of his boldest uses of the classics. I don't think in this respect it's just window dressing or something like that. It's a very bold attempt because what you have is, and you have on these maps in the period, a line across the middle of Africa and below it lines in little legend in Latin saying, beyond here the ancients didn't know about it, which is an amazing thing that Ptolemy, the geographer who mapped the world, didn't know about southern Africa. So this means Homer didn't know about the Titans who might be in southern Africa.
Right.
So in one of his boldest moves to connect old and new, HARMWLXX discovers a new classical mythic figure in southern Africa who is represented by this Table Mountain that's actually there, that he actually saw. Not only is it the influence of the past on the present, but now the present is influencing the past. He's discovered a new antiquity.